Good afternoon and welcome to Biztech Asian Midday Marketwatch. Our guest today is Leung, founder and CIO of Track Record Asia. V, great to have you on the show again.
Hey, hi. Good to be back.
Now, let's take a quick look across the region and see how markets are performing. But let's start before that with the crypto markets. Now, Bitcoin is at 36,418. It's up 3.02%. Ethereum is at 2,415.74. It's down 1.85%. Now, if we look across stock markets in the region, it's a sea of red. We're going to start with the SGX, which is at 3,245.69. It's down 1.15%. The KLSE is at 1,504.89. It's down 1.12%. Shanghai is at 3,480.07, down 1.25%. The ASX All Ordinaries is at 7,234.4. It's down 2.78%. The Nikkei is at 26,911. It's down 2.47%. The Hang Seng is at 24,257. It's down 1.63%. And the Kospi is down a whopping 3.1% at 2,705.56. V, what's the reason for this sea of red and really quite horrific numbers across the region?
Horrific numbers. I think it could have been worse, but luckily the US stock markets recovered towards the close. We had the S&P 500 dropping 4% at yesterday's lows and NASDAQ almost 5% yesterday. But they managed to stage a strong comeback and ended the day slightly in the positive, like 0.5% across the board on the indices. So that improved sentiment a little bit. I think today's weakness in Asian markets is likely to be position adjusting ahead of the Fed's meeting tomorrow night, and also because Australian inflation numbers were stronger than expected. That's the bogeyman these days, right? Inflation, and also the MAS they adjusted their FX policy intermeeting without. It's a surprise to the market because they tend to make their decisions at scheduled meetings, and this is the first time in history, if I recall correctly, that they tighten policy, right? They usually loosen policy in intermeeting adjustments.
And the Monetary Authority of Singapore tends to be relatively predictable. So this is really this is really out of the ordinary.
Yes. I think it's kind of a strange decision to do an intermeeting action ahead of the Fed tomorrow, and it's a tightening move, and the tightening move is not really significant. It's a slight adjustment to the appreciation slope of the FX policy, and I think it's just trying to tell the markets that they're concerned about inflation. But if it's a slight appreciation mode, you really do not need to tell anybody about it, because the band is also a mystery to most people. They can manage the band as and when they like it. If it's slight, right, it's within the margins of error. So it kind of, I think maybe that put a dent in risk sentiment as well, because it kind of seems like central banks are panicking right now after telling us for months that inflation is transitory, inflation is moderate, inflation will be coming down due to base effects, and then suddenly all of them is coming to tell us that inflation is a problem. So that is not very confidence inspiring. It's like, what are these guys doing? But of course, MAS is one of the more sensible central banks in not just the region, but in fact the world. They must have some reasons for doing this. Maybe it's just to reassure the market that we are doing something. We do not want to have a weak currency, right? Because if the Fed starts to tighten policy, then the dollar may start to strengthen. Yeah.
Okay, but also one of the things, V, that's probably weighing in on markets is the situation in the Ukraine and the escalation in geopolitical tensions as a result. What's your view on this, especially in the light of Asian markets?
I think when it rains, it pours, right? The Ukraine situation has been brewing for some time, and the market has not really paid much attention to it. But because markets are weak, that's why we need shows like yours, right? Because you have to highlight the risk and what's the pulse of the market. So I think with regards to the Ukraine Russia situation, I think the only person who knows what's going to happen next is Putin, right? I think he does whatever he wants to do, and the world doesn't really know how to control him, and they never really bothered for some time, right? So
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen if he decides to invade is going to weigh on risk assets, U.S. stocks markets, um, in general, stock markets around the world, because I think, I mean, the world doesn't never needs a war, but it's always a bad time to have a war when the markets are weak in the first place, right? So and one of the fears that we have right currently is inflation, and war typically will disrupt supply chains, will cause price inflation across the board in many things that we need, right? So I think it's going to be one of the key risks that we need to monitor, and is something that we cannot really know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, we live in times of conspiracy theories that gets to air their views to pretty much anybody who has an internet connection. And one of the things that kind of really drove the fear of markets yesterday, when U.S. stocks were selling off in a hard, in a very aggressive manner, was that there's conspiracy theories that says that China has made a deal with Russia when NATO is distracted by the Ukraine conflict. If Russia makes a move into Ukraine territory, then China may make a play for Taiwan. Of course, I think it's just a conspiracy theory, but this generally tells me that the fear factor is very high right now, and any plausible story to induce you to sell it happens, right? So I think that's what's driving the markets right now. But having said that, I think the recovery yesterday in the US stock markets is quite significant. It's quite interesting because
And that was bargain hunting, isn't it? Particularly among tech stocks.
Yes. So, for example, ARK-K, which is Cathie Wood's ETF. Cathie Woods, as you may know, was the hero of 2020, the investment hero of 2020, and then somehow became the villain of 2021. And then now everybody seems to think that they are no better than her, right? This just shows how fleeting the love of the love of the masses are, right? You never listen to the cheering crowd. They could be cheering just as loud if it's your head on the guillotine, right? And they're just gonna behead you, right? And that's exactly what's happening to. I think I bring this up because I think it's a good sign of what the market sentiments are right now. Yesterday, ARK-K, her flagship ETF fund, was down nearly 10%. It had a record day of volumes, and then it ended the day up almost 1%. I think anybody who wanted to cut would have cut yesterday ahead of the Fed meeting. And I think if you're holding out for the Fed to save you, you probably would have cut yesterday. And the fierce pullback is encouraging, right? On the technical charts, it's usually on heavy volumes and a daily reversal. That usually marks the short-term bottom. But unfortunately for us, there's two things that still really matter, which is actually one thing that really matters is the Fed announcement on tomorrow, and the press conference of the Fed Chair Powell and his tone, right? He's going to tell us about his plans going forward. So if they come in a lot more hawkish than markets, then we're going to have another spillover. And one other, I mean, capitulation on heavy volumes are typically good, but the other thing is that few previous times I can recall such a move in S&P where it's down so much on the day and then it recovers towards the end of the day and ended the day positive. The two occurrence that this happened was in 2008, and that did not mark the bottom, right? So bear market rallies are very, very fierce because that's how it gets the average person to come back in, and then it sucks you in. It's a bear trap, right? You buy and then it collapses again.
Yeah.
But we are not. Hopefully, we are not in a situation where the Fed is incentivized to cause a market crash. So hopefully, they will temper the tone of their statements and their comments on Wednesday, right?
Pete, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Cool. See ya. Bye-bye.
Now, we've been speaking to Leung, CEO at Track Record Asia on Biztech Asian Midday Marketwatch. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video and podcast will be on our various platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.